He fired 15 times into a woman who was already walking away from him. And 3 hours later, he turned himself in without a single word of remorse. What happened in those 3 hours is the part almost no one gets right. 5 days before Christmas, on a quiet street in Melbourne, Florida, gunfire breaks the morning silence. 15 rounds, fired at a 23-year-old woman as she tries to walk back into her own home. By the time her father reaches the front door, she's already on the ground, face down in the carport. This is Sha'Dayla Johnson, a woman known for giving people the benefit of the doubt. The man responsible was someone she had once trusted completely. To understand how this happened, we have to go back 5 months, to the day these two people's paths first crossed. Sha'Dayla grew up in the same Melbourne home she would later die in front of, raised by a father who described her as endlessly generous. Carlos Jones had a stable upbringing too, and real athletic talent, enough to earn a college scholarship in Illinois. But that opportunity fell apart after a single season, and Carlos returned home with no degree, no job, and mounting tension with his father. By the summer of 2022, he was living out of his car. That was the version of Carlos who walked into an Aldi grocery store and noticed the woman working the register. Sha'Dayla and Carlos met in July 2022, and within weeks, she learned he had nowhere to live. Rather than see it as a warning, she saw someone worth helping. They moved in together almost immediately. Her best friend would later describe how Sha'Dayla viewed Carlos as someone broken by circumstance, someone she could help repair. She told her friend he had a good heart buried underneath a difficult exterior. But by the 5-month mark, that belief was already being tested by behavior that had nothing to do with circumstance and everything to do with control. 4 days before Thanksgiving, an argument escalated to the point that Sha'Dayla grabbed a kitchen knife and told Carlos to stay back. Police arrived, and she was arrested on a charge of aggravated assault, a charge prosecutors dropped 9 days later, the kind of quick dismissal that usually means the case never held up. What mattered wasn't the arrest. It was what it revealed, a relationship serious enough to bring in police. Sha'Dayla ended things and moved back in with her father. Carlos didn't accept it, and what came next made that clear. After the breakup, Carlos bombarded Sha'Dayla with calls and messages. Hostile, vulgar, constant. She ignored every one of them. She considered a restraining order, but she'd just started a job she liked and didn't want to ask for time off so soon. So she waited. She had no way of knowing that decision would cost her the only window she had left. 2 weeks passed with no direct contact between them, until one final afternoon, when Carlos tried reaching her one more time, and she still didn't answer. Carlos woke up angry that morning, not over any new event, just over the fact that Sha'Dayla still wasn't responding. In that moment, he decided he was going to kill her. He knew her schedule. Just after 7:30, he drove to her house and waited, blocking her car in the driveway. When she stepped outside for work, they exchanged words. As she turned to go back inside, Carlos raised a 9mm pistol. Her father, resting inside, heard the shots and rushed to the window. But by the time he reached the door, Carlos was already gone. With no suspect in custody, investigators moved fast, canvassing the neighborhood for anyone who had seen the car leave. A nearby worker had a black sedan, tinted windows, dark rims, likely a newer Nissan Altima. That description matched what a license plate camera captured minutes later, tracing the vehicle back to Carlos Jones. Law enforcement across the area had his name within the hour, but they never got the chance to track him down themselves, because less than 3 hours after the shooting, Carlos did something no one expected. Carlos walked into the Palm Bay Police Department on his own, unprompted, and made an offhand comment about facing 35 years, without explaining why. For nearly half an hour before detectives arrived, He sat making small talk with officers, seemingly unbothered by what he'd done hours earlier. When asked about his relationships, he said he'd never gotten along with anyone, framing every falling out as something that happened to him rather than something he caused. That pattern of blame would resurface again once the real interrogation began. Once Melbourne detectives arrived and read him his rights, Carlos's story started to unravel. He eventually admitted to driving to Sha'Dayla's home that morning, describing the confrontation and firing as she turned to walk away. He estimated firing 15 rounds, based on how many remained in his magazine. He described discarding his clothes, the ammunition box, the magazine, and finally the gun itself across multiple locations on his drive north. He said it was his mother's phone call, not guilt, that brought him to the police station. And when asked if he felt remorse, his answer would define how this case ended. Carlos Jones told police he felt no remorse, adding that given the chance, he would have killed Sha'Dayla's father too. A jury later convicted him of second-degree murder with a firearm, and in December 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison. But the ending of this story doesn't belong to him. Sha'Dayla Johnson wasn't naive for trying to help someone with nowhere else to turn. Her compassion was never the problem. It was the exact quality a dangerous person learned to exploit.